Hello everyone and welcome to Layered Future. If you're not familiar with the channel or me, my name's Glenn and the channel is really focused on how technology impacts the human experience. This video is no exception. It's the first in a 3-part series where I'm going to explore how technology impacts our behaviour in deep, kind of almost subtle ways, but in deep ways that impact how we operate as a society, how we act as individuals. And I think it's a really important area to explore generally, but I also think it's a really important area to explore as we move into a future that's going to be very much directed, accelerated, enhanced by artificial intelligence. So if that sounds like the sort of thing you're interested in, then hopefully you will find this of interest. Okay, so like I say, this is the first part of a 3-part series. This is called Different Worlds, Different People. The next part is called The Compression of Reality. And the third part is called The Age of Permanent Adaptation. Okay, let's get going. So section 1 is called The Illusion of the Fixed Human. And within this section, what I want to do is break some things down, highlight some things that you already know, but kind of cross them over and synthesize them with other aspects of life, because I think it's really important to make some bridges sometimes between things that we're very familiar with and things that we're less familiar with. And when we can do that, often everything becomes a little bit clearer, hopefully. So to start with, the person you are today is not the only version of you that could have existed. Now, I'm not going to get into philosophy. I'm not going to get into what the soul is and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about from an almost raw computational brain perspective. You're born, and you're born with a certain biological hardware, and then as you move through life, clearly you experience lots of different things. So that's the angle I'm taking this from. I'm talking about how our experiences and environment shape us. Nobody's personality is created in isolation. It emerges from a synthesis of our biology and the environment that we find ourselves in. So the notion that we are kind of born as resolved people, or that we're born to, and we'll always end up being a certain way, is clearly not the case. Education changes us, experiences change us, the people we meet, the countries we live in, the places we visit, the things we watch, read, games we play, whatever it might be. All of those things impact us throughout our lives. And it's obvious, isn't it, that getting a good education will give you more life opportunities. It will inform you, it will make you a more critical thinker, and all those different things. But people don't always then realise or give enough attention to, in my opinion, the fact that applies to everything. So, for example, having a digital watch on your wrist then changes your relationship with time. If you didn't have that, then your relationship, if you didn't have any access to timekeeping on you, then your relationship with time would be different, and your life and the way you behaved and acted would be very slightly different. So I'm kind of wanting people to take a bird's eye view on this, to zoom out and look at all the different areas of particularly technology that are changing how we act and behave. So every human is born with a unique set of predispositions, clearly, strengths and limitations. All right. So I'm going to use me as an example here. There's some things I'm relatively good at. So I'm fairly creative. I mean, that's my background, is in art and graphic design, illustration. I do video editing and things like that. So that's, I guess you could say, as a strength. I'm really bad at singing. I'm not, athletic in any way. And I'm not a team player when it comes to sport and things, So everyone's different, not good or bad. Everyone is just different. That's what makes life rich and interesting, and it's what makes it positive and really beneficial to know a range of different people. Those biological foundations influence our nature and capabilities, but they don't fully determine who we become. So I am not very good at singing, okay? Having said that, when I was a kid, I did sing because I was taught when I was at school, and I ended up doing some concerts and little concerts and things. So even though naturally I really struggle to sing in tune, the fact that I was given lessons to sing made me just about bearable to listen to, though not very good. Now, when it comes to my creative side, I have a natural tendency to want to create things. I have a natural tendency to be sort of relatively good at doing that. But then I have gone through various forms of education, through school, college, university, postgraduate education in visual arts and things. And also I have spent time with a lot of creative people. So I've been surrounded by creative people, and that has shaped and adjusted that area of, strengthened that area of who I am. And that's because the environment we are born into is incredibly important in shaping our development. So the fact that I was born in the UK, I was born in a place where there is quite a lot of creativity going on. My dad has always been creative and created art. I was in a school when I was younger where it was really encouraged to be creative. I then went to a college where I studied art, and everyone really encouraged me to do it. Now, not everyone gets these opportunities. Not everyone has those chances in life to do the things they want to do. So if I have found myself in a situation where I couldn't do the things I wanted to do, then that would have suppressed and weakened that area of my personality. In fact, if I'd been born in a totally different time period, and we're going to talk about living in different time periods soon, then that area of me may never have had the chance to flourish. And, anyone talking to me may have never realized that was hidden deep within. The exact same person born into two different worlds would likely become two quite different people, is what I'm trying to say. So, let's say you're really naturally good at maths, something incidentally I am not. If you're really good at maths, but you're born at a time period into an environment where brain work, cognitive heavy thought process work is not championed, and you're not congratulated for it, and the opportunities to express that, especially in work, are not provided, then, and you're told, no, actually, you're going to go and work in this factory for 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, then you will become one person. If you're born into another environment where you can express those skills and abilities, then you'll become a different type of person. So to understand ourselves, we really have to understand the environments that have created us. And I've been focusing on really common things so far in terms of, life opportunities, things like education particularly. But we're going to switch soon to focusing on technology, because technology is, in my opinion, one of the biggest drivers in changing our external environment and therefore shaping our internal ways of being. So section 2 is called human adaptability, and we're going to talk about how, as humans, we are incredibly adaptable, how, in terms of who we are on Earth, we are the most adaptable of creatures, and we're going to go from there. So humans are among the most adaptable creatures on Earth. I don't think there are many people that would disagree with that, because we've shown our adaptability by reshaping the planet, but it's an important area that we do need to focus on. Unlike most species, we can quickly change our behaviour without waiting for biological evolution. So if we suddenly find our environment and experiences change dramatically, which they do, if you look at the world we live in now, it's vastly different to the world we lived in 100 years ago. We can, while maintaining exactly the same hardware, reform our thinking to adapt our lives and change what we do so that we can cope in a changed environment. Other species need to wait for biology to evolve to that, to evolve to kind of meet these changes. Now, I'm not saying that you couldn't take a bird from this time period and transport it back in time to, say, the medieval period. it would be absolutely fine. Okay, it would be totally fine. But when you look at all of the creatures that have become extinct over millennia, then what you'll find is that there are species that would be around now were they as adaptable as humans, because they could have adapted to the very strange world that we've kind of built on planet Earth. Other animals have adapted, or at least their natural tendencies allowed them to adapt slightly. So if you look at pigeons, they all live on tall buildings, or they spend a lot of time on tall buildings, because that mimics cliffs, which is what they evolved for. So actually, our buildings have sort of mirrored their natural environments anyway, so they can sort of shift from using cliffs to using our buildings. But if all of a sudden they found themselves in a completely flat environment, they might struggle. I'm not a pigeon expert, so I'm not going to go into that. I chose that as a random example, but you see what I'm trying to say. We have an ability to adapt to new rules, new technologies, and new ways of living with remarkable speed. And I genuinely do think it is remarkable. I was born in 1980. The world I was born into is totally different in so many ways to the world that I find myself in now. Even the fact I'm sitting at a desk, I've got 3 screens in front of me, one recording the audio, one recording video, another one with some notes on it, and I'm going to cut this into a video, upload it to the cloud, and then you're streaming it and you might be listening to it in a different country. Look, these things were nowhere near possible when I was born, but I've adapted the way that I can express myself and get my ideas out there based on the environment that I have found myself in. And that goes for so many different things throughout my life, throughout all of our lives, the way that our environments have changed and shifted, and we have molded ourselves really around the environment. Much of what feels natural to us is simply what we've become accustomed to, and I think that's something we don't spend enough time reflecting on. So, for example, very quickly we've become accustomed to the social media world that we find ourselves in. We've become accustomed to getting gratification from likes from people we don't know who live miles and miles away. We've become accustomed to feeling like we need to share aspects of our lives with other people. We've become accustomed to the notion that if we're not sharing aspects of our lives, or if people aren't liking them, then maybe we need to adjust what we do. Okay. Now, incidentally, I don't think that's what we do need to do. We definitely don't need to adjust our lives and behavior based on the amount of likes that we get. But what I'm saying is that our base understanding of what society is has shifted, and we don't stop to reflect, hang on, we've become accustomed to a very, very different system to what other humans have lived with. As a result of this, things that once seemed strange can become normal surprisingly quickly. So social media was a great example of that, but we don't need to go very far back into history to think of things like air travel. That was something that all of a sudden opened up the globe, and now it's completely normal. I'm going on holiday in a month or so abroad, and that's just completely normal now. And in fact, as I'll talk about a little bit later, because we've become accustomed to these things, they become expectations. And if we can't do them, then we find it very frustrating. Many behaviours we consider human are actually responses to specific circumstances. So I used the example of social media earlier, but there are many other aspects of technology, smartphones, connected living, constant, instant notifications about pretty much everything, has, for example, given us anxiety, right? So there is an underlying level of anxiety with a lot of people because they are constantly on. They constantly have to be on. They've got a device on them. They need to be checking it. You may, I hope, you're not someone who's impacted too much by that, but I know a lot of people are. I've found myself impacted by that. Even sitting there watching TV or spending time with my partner or friends, and I feel an urge to check my phone. Yeah. So that to me, at least, has created levels of, I guess, dissatisfaction and anxiety that I'm not doing those things. And they are responses to circumstances. They're responses to the circumstance that we now live in a hyper-connected world. There's expectations. We need to have a smartphone. We need to use social media, or we need to always be replying to emails for work or whatever it might be. So the impulse to check all the time, check our phone, is actually a response to the world that we collectively have built for ourselves. Humanity is constantly adjusting itself to changing conditions, and that's always been the case. You don't need to. You go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, and we have changed and adapted our behaviour as a whole to the changing shape of the planet, the changing shape of the societies that we've built, and the expectations and the way things are done. Okay, so section 3: different worlds create different people. A person from medieval England would find the modern world overwhelming and incomprehensible. There have been films where people have, been frozen in time and reawoken in the present, and, much amusement is had by seeing how they try and deal with the world. Now, the reason for this is because of our incredible abilities to adapt. So if you look at someone from medieval England, so I come from the UK, I'm recording this in England at the moment. I'm really into history. I won't go into that now, but I do love history. So someone from medieval England would have a completely different program running, completely different software running in their brains compared to us. So they come to the late 2020s, right? And they try and get along in the world. Well, they're going to struggle. Now, they could adapt, right? So they will adapt over years with help and assistance. They will adapt because we're adaptable. But the point I'm trying to make is when they arrive, they would be like a fish out of water. There'll be things that their world back in the medieval period had programmed them with, things like almost all-encompassing religious beliefs, which drive everything they do. Living to the seasons, living between light and dark, because times before electricity, and when even having candles wasn't possible. So these people, were they to come here, they would find themselves in an environment where the way that they'd been shaped just didn't work anymore. It's like a square peg trying to go into a round hole. But equally, most modern people would struggle with the realities of medieval life. If you or I went back to the medieval period, sure, we'd find it fascinating, interesting, all those things, and I'd love to do it. But we just wouldn't be able to cope because we would be continually cold. If you lived in the UK, especially in the winter, you'd be constantly cold. You would be probably quite damp because we didn't have proper clothes to protect you from the elements. You would have to live by the light. You would have to live in fear. Depending on where you lived, you never knew if someone might come to attack you without the proper protection of a organised police force. All those types of things we take for granted, and we would go back and find things very challenging. Importantly, neither group is superior. So neither medieval people or contemporary people are superior. Each is adapted to its own environment. So the hardware, in fact, is the same. So the human brain is pretty much identical in every way, whether you were living in the medieval period or you're living now. But the difference is the software, the programming, the operating system that's running on that hardware. So each person from each time period adapts to the environment they find themselves in. Every generation develops expectations based on the world it inherits. So, I've been talking about medieval times, I'm talking about going back hundreds of years. Forget that. If you're looking at generation X, Z, Y, whatever, every generation has developed different expectations based on their own personal worlds within the broader world that they inherit. And that causes conflicts between generations and conflicts between parents and their kids even. But what I'm trying to say is our adaptability isn't just measured in centuries, it's measured in years. the expectations of one era can seem bizarre to another. And I think that, for example, I expect things instantaneously. I've got to be honest with you. Born in 1980, but at the end of the day, I was kind of mostly formed, I suppose, in my late teens, early 20s, when the internet was really starting to take off and fly. And I suppose a lot of my thinking was shaped around a world where I could get instant access to information. And I think that conflicts, for example, with someone of my parents' generation, even though clearly all people have adapted to using the internet. I just mean that my expectations aren't just limited to finding out, when a film's showing online. It's also extends into things like, I expect things to be done very, very quickly, or expect to get from A to B quickly, and all those different things. What feels normal to us would often appear extraordinary to our ancestors. And I mean, as I said to you before about the medieval period, but even if you went back to the 1920s or the 1950s, or during the Second World War, and you brought someone from then to now, I think that they would find what we consider to be normal as being a hyper hectic, very odd existence, because they were much more used to slow living in a disconnected world. So they would see our use of technology as amazing. They'd be fascinated and hugely impressed by it. But I think they'd also find the amount of cars on the road, the constant noise, the constant drone of action and machinery and bleeps and notifications to be disorientating to the point that they would be quite unhappy. And what felt normal to our ancestors would feel intolerable to us. As I said about the medieval period, but you don't need to go back that far. You could go back to the 1920s when there wasn't electricity in the way that there is now. It was available, but it wasn't widespread and in most people's homes, when people had toilets in the garden. So our expectations and what we feel we need to be able to live at a certain level of contentment has adjusted over time. Each generation is shaped by a unique combination of opportunities and constraints. So as we progress, and I think this is so important for people to realise and appreciate, because we use the word progress, it doesn't mean that things are always getting better. It means we're moving forward. It means that things are changing, and I guess broadly things are getting better, but sometimes things get worse. And I've created videos about that. My video series, The Optimization Trap, goes into that, about how optimization has caused lots of issues in itself. But as I say, each generation is shaped by a unique combination of opportunities. So, for example, access to education, as I said, access to resources, access to time. Someone who works in the late 2020s is actually working in a less time-constrained environment than someone who would have been working in a factory during the Industrial Revolution. So there's opportunities that we get, but also constraints. Someone working in a factory during the Industrial Revolution didn't also lie awake at night worrying about an email or get a notification while they're not at work asking for something, you see? So opportunities, constraints, things holding us back, things that are stopping us living in the way that we should. So section 4 is called Expectations Shape Experience. And this is where I want to take some of these expectations and dial in a little bit to them and see how they actually shape what the human experience is. So humans do not simply adapt to reality, we adapt to what we expect reality to be. And that is an important distinction, because if you walk out of your house now, or walk out of any building you're in or whatever, and you walk down the street and you turn a corner, you are going to expect to see a certain thing. You're going to have a rough idea of what you see. We're essentially prediction machines. And I think there's a lot of links actually between the way that we think and the way that AI thinks. But I won't go into that now. That'll be opening up a whole can of worms. But We are essentially prediction machines. When you just open a door and walk into a different room, we know what to expect. Okay, so we have adapted to what we expect our reality to be like and how we expect it to gradually evolve and adapt. Expectations influence our satisfaction. They also influence our frustration and our sense of well-being. So going back to that example that I just gave, humans do not simply adapt to reality, we adapt to what we expect reality to be. Well, if we expect our future reality, if we expect what the world's going to be like in 1, 2, 3 years to be a certain way, and it's not, then that influences our levels of satisfaction. It makes us frustrated and it damages our well-being. It damages our sense of well-being. Modern people expect comfort, convenience, and immediate access to information. As I say, my generation, I'm a Zennial actually, which is kind of a bridge between Generation X and Millennial. What that means, I mean, I was born in 1980, so kind of between generations. And I grew up in a very much an analog world, but then when I hit my teens, I really entered the digital world, and then my entire working life has been immersed in the digital world. So got a bit of both going on there. But what that's meant is that I do expect immediate access to information. My whole mindset is around that. I have always got my smartphone on me. I try very much not to let it direct my life. I've stopped using social media apart from YouTube. I don't use Instagram I don't use any social media for anything to do with me, my personal life and things. And I try and limit my use of apps and different things. I use my phone really for Google searches, AI, and writing, making notes on the fly. And that's what I mainly use it for, or listening to podcasts in the car and things. But my expectations as to the access to information and convenience were shaped by my experiences, and most people in the modern world, that is the case for them. That everyone now really expects a base level of comfort. We expect to be warm, we expect to have food readily available, we expect to be safe, we expect to be able to access media and information very, very quickly. Many things we now consider necessities were once unimaginable luxuries, and this is another of the things that I think that we don't stop to think about enough. We often think ourselves, and I'm talking about in countries that have really good access to stuff, really good education, really good access to services and infrastructure and all that kind of thing. So I'm not, I fully appreciate there are parts of the world where that isn't the case. I'm talking about, I guess, my experiences to an extent. But many of the things we consider necessities were only 30 years ago considered to be the sort of thing that you needed to be incredibly rich to be able to access. A great example is when I go to London. I actually like walking around a lot when I go to London, but if I want a taxi, I will get an Uber and I will get it instantaneously, and it will be if we go in the summer, air conditioned, comfortable, like a chauffeur driven ride. Now, if you went back not that long ago, to get that sort of service, you needed to pay quite a lot for that. If you wanted to get a ride within 20 seconds, 30 seconds from one place to another, okay, you could hail a cab, sure. But you can actually order someone to pick you up in the same way that someone who had a chauffeur could do. And there are many, many other examples across the span of life where we're now accessing stuff, even food, the quality of food that we have now compared to 50 years ago, and the price of food, even though it's gone up a lot in recent years, it's been very, very cheap. I mean, a chicken costs virtually nothing, whereas it used to be considered a luxury. So anyway, you can see how a lot of the things that we now see as normal were once only enjoyed by people with access to riches, and power, actually. The easier life becomes in some areas, the more our expectations tend to rise. So this is part of the problem. The fact that as our lives become easier, as technology impacts our quality of life and makes our lives easier, we begin to expect more. We We don't understand why things might go wrong. We don't understand why there's failures because, well, why should there be? Everything's worked. Everything was working. What's going on? We look for people to blame and so on and so forth. So there is a clear link between life getting easier and a shift in our collective and individual expectations. As expectations change, our perception of hardship changes too. What we now consider hardship would, to people from generations past, probably be considered either normal or just a slight variation. Getting soaking wet, being really cold, being unwell and not being able to access paracetamol or a tablet to take away a headache, that kind of thing. Yeah. So we now feel as though a lot of the situations that humans dealt with for centuries, we would classify them as hardship, when actually previous humans did not see them as hardship. They saw them as life, really, as everyday life. What we take for granted often reveals more about our environment than ourselves, because it is a reflection, it's a mirror really, into the world in which we have grown up in and which we inhabit. Because you can see very clearly from our expectations what things are in place that have made that possible, that have built those expectations for all of us. Okay, so section 5, our relationship with tools. And this is where my interest really lies. And I'm not talking about tools that you'd find in your work shed or whatever, although that is a part of it. I'm really talking about the landscape of technology, not just individual tools, but connected tools, and the way that these things have changed us as people. One of humanity's defining characteristics is our ability to create and use tools. I don't need to tell you, there's no other creature on the planet that uses tools in the way we do. There are birds that will pick up stones and crack shells. There are simple tools that primates will use. There are tools used throughout the animal kingdom, but they are very simple, often one-use tools that enable an animal to eat and survive. But we create tools of huge complexity, and not just for survival. We create tools to change our experience. So think about something like what a chef, an amazing Michelin-starred restaurant chef might use, the tools that they may use within their kitchen. A sous vide machine, if they're called that, where you can put food, a steak, into a little sealed bag and then gently poach it at a certain temperature. Mixers, all these different types of things. They're not about survival. They're about creating food that we find delicious, that enhance our experience. So humanity is very different to other animals in that we have built a collection of tools to shape our experience of being alive. Tools allow us to reshape the environment around us. So, I don't know where you live when you're listening to this, but you likely live in a place where the entire environment is human shaped. Now, I live in the UK, and aside from going up a mountain, which we don't have very many of, but when I've been up Snowdon, like Mount Snowdon, or Ben Nevis in Scotland, apart from where you get to those really wild, naturally formed environments, 99.9% of the UK is completely human shaped. It would have been covered in forest. It's nothing like what we see now. What we consider now to be beautiful countryside, and it is agricultural countryside. It's something that's been created by humans. It is not natural. And of course, we've used tools at every step of the way in changing that environment. Every major technological breakthrough changes how people live. So I'm going to run through some, but it's important for us to take this on board and realize that, because we have just entered the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest technological breakthrough that we have ever made and probably will ever make, which is artificial intelligence. It hasn't happened in the past couple of years, been going on for decades, but the ground we've made, the point to which we've got is mind-melting. And it is really, really going to change how we live. Technology alters the problems we face and the opportunities available to us. So, vaccines against diseases, warmth through electricity, warmth through gas, medical things like surgery, all the problems we might face in our lives where we might potentially die, technology has the power to save us. But it's not just that. It also, as I said earlier, provides us with enhanced life, amazing flat screen TVs, surround sound, instant access to pretty much every bit of human knowledge all through the internet, that kind of thing. It creates brand new opportunities for us, and it changes the way we live, who we are, our behavior, and the way we live because of those opportunities. When the environment changes, people change with it. As the world around us shifts, as I've already kind of covered, but I just want to underline it and highlight it. When the environment changes, we change. And yet our environment really changes without our say-so. We don't, as individuals, have any say in this. We don't say, no, actually, do you know what? I don't want there to be aviation. I don't want there to be planes. I don't want there to be trains. I don't want there to be cars. Like, no one's ever had the power to say that. No single individual. Technology, to an extent, in my mind, is a force, an uncontrollable force, and a byproduct of humanity as a whole. Technology doesn't simply extend human capability, it influences human behavior. Yes, technology clearly adds certain aspects to our lives, a multitude of aspects to our lives, and increases our capability as a result, but it also changes, it reprograms who we are as people. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but through our use of technology, the way we behave alters. So in that sense, the history of humanity is also the history of environmental redesign. The way that we have, as a species, changed our environment mirrors perfectly how we've changed as people. Yeah, so it's how humanity has grown and formed over time. Okay, section 6, technology as an environmental force. So what we're doing here is taking everything I've said and trying to see technology for what I believe it is, which is a powerful force that almost molds our environment and us as people like clay. Yeah, so it has the power through our use of it, our interaction with it, to change us as a species. A great example is how cities changed how people interacted with one another. Cities are really unnatural environments actually for people. We're supposed to live with about 100 different people in smallish tribes, get to know everyone, have that close interaction. That's what we evolved for. So cities are a real shift away from that. We walk along through cities not talking to people. We ignore people, we blank people as we walk past them. That is the nature of a city. If you went up and talked to everyone that you saw in, say, London or New York, then people would think, what's going on with this person? Why is he talking? Why is he or she talking to us? I don't know them. So living in a city is a very unnatural thing for us to do, and it shapes us as a result of that. Railways changed how humans understood distance. I mean, the railway system is something that totally collapsed our notion of time and travel, because prior to that, it was all horse-drawn. You had to get a carriage or a single horse. You'd ride a horse. A journey of say 100 miles is measured in days. It's not measured in an hour or 2 hours. Railways changed that with direct routes and fast travel. Cars changed how humans organise daily life. Again, this is obvious, but we don't stop to think about it. I don't work a huge distance in my main job as a lecturer. I don't work a huge distance away from where I live. It's about a 20-minute drive, but without it, I couldn't get to where I need to be. So it's changed where I live for a start, but it's also changed everything. It's changed where I can go. A weekend, I might drive with my partner for an hour away. Yeah, we might go to the coast, or we might go an interesting thing we want to go and see, a museum or country house or whatever it is. We'll drive there. It's opened up the world to us. Without that easy to reach transport, we couldn't do what we wanted to do. We wouldn't have the experiences we had. We wouldn't learn what we learned. We'd be different people, right? So cars have changed how we organise daily life. We drive to buy our shopping, we drive to get medical care, we drive everywhere. And even though in the UK we're certainly not set up for that because we're mainly just a massive collection of villages, so a lot of our roads are single track and you have to pull over to let people go past if you're out in the countryside. Cars are still the main form of transport and something that's totally dominated our lives, and noise levels. Don't get me started on that. Electricity changed how humans experience time. I explained earlier, touched upon how people used to have to live by the seasons. Now with electricity, we can have fully electrified houses, which basically pretty much everyone does, with lighting in every room. When it gets dark, we just turn the light on, or the lights come on automatically. We don't have to worry about stopping what we're doing because the sun is setting. Electricity fundamentally changed our relationship with time. The internet changed how humans access knowledge. I think I'm the sort of person who never loses wonder in these things because I'm still blown away by the internet. I mean, I first used it, I think, in about 1994. When I was a kid, I was 14. I was blown away by it then. I'm blown away by it now, and I'm 46 now. And every time I use it, I mean, not every time I use it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Because most of the time, to be honest, I use it for work. If I'm uploading a video or if I'm downloading some software, it amazes me that through a fiber optic cable, huge quantities of information could be sent from one country to another basically instantaneously. I'm amazed when I use AI and I can chat, have a literal conversation with a machine that is based in a completely different country instantaneously, or, the responses come back within a second. Smartphones changed how humans interact with the world around them. Probably one of the most important devices that's ever been created is the smartphone, basically a pocket computer. And I've got a video coming up about that, which is about smartphones versus journals. It might sound a bit odd, but there's a reason for it. It's comparing these two pocketable devices and how we've changed what we do with our spare time. And I just think that yes, huge quantities of benefits smartphones have given us. I don't leave the house without one. I would never go on a long walk or a drive without one in case I broke down or needed to call someone. But I'm also aware of the negatives as well. Constantly being on demand, kind of 24/7, having a constant distraction as well, and the world of engagement, which kind of rules all of our lives. So it's if I had to choose one device actually that has changed humanity, I would choose that. One sort of small device is the smartphone. But anyway, each new technology quietly rewrites the conditions under which people live. So all of these things have reshaped the world around us. They've reshaped what we do with our lives and reshaped who we are. Okay, so to bring all this together, tie all this up, I just want to really underline what the core idea of this is. Although biologically similar, people from different eras are psychologically shaped by very different worlds. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that we are the product of our environment. We are the product of the framework that we have to exist in. And a lot of that is technology. A lot of that is tools. A lot of that now is the digital world. And that's what I wanted to create this lecture series for, because I want to highlight that, and I want people to start to realize that their behavior is being shaped by these things, and that they have the power to not turn their back on it, but to take charge if they want to and curate the way that these technologies impact them on a daily basis. Long story short, the same hardware placed in different environments can produce remarkably different humans. I think the best way to think about it is like buying a computer or building a computer with no operating system on it, no software on it, just some basic firmware and all that hardware, the chip, the graphics processor and all that stuff. And then thereafter, different programs, an operating system, then different programs and software are installed, and that really shapes the capabilities and the way the computer runs. And we're quite similar to that in many ways. I think the most important thing to consider, the real takeaway from this, is how our changing environment is shaping who we're becoming. And it's something that I am certainly looking at for me and my life, and I just think other people may be interested in doing the same thing themselves. Thank you so much for listening, watching, whatever you've done, whether it's been you're on a run somewhere, getting fit, whether you're driving in a car and this has helped you get through the boredom of that, or if you're sitting down watching it on a screen, on your TV, on your phone, on your laptop, I don't care. Thank you so much for using some of your valuable time to listen to my thoughts. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Take care. See you again in the future.